Welcome to Financial Insider Weekly. I'm your host, Michael Gray, CPA. My guest today is Betty Baker Marshall. Betty is an attorney. She has her own law practice in Campbell, California. Been there since 1994. She is a certified specialist in estate planning, trust, and probate law by the California Board of Legal Specialization of the State Bar of California.
I know, it's so long.
Yeah. Betty received her JD degree, cum laude, from Santa Clara University School of Law in 1991, and a bachelor's degree in public administration from the University of San Francisco in 1985. And before that, she had jobs for the Sacramento County Public Administrator Guardian's Office and was a program and contract manager for Santa Clara County Mental Health and worked for the Public Guardian's Office in Santa Clara County. Is that where you met Russ?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Betty's husband is Russ Marshall, and he is a professional fiduciary. And anyway, very nice couple. Betty is the co-author of the Continuing Education of the Bar Practice Manual on Conservatorships and Elder Law Practice, and speaks extensively on elder law issues and other topics relating to estate planning and caring for incapacitated persons. And today, Betty and I are going to be talking about elder law issues related to caregiving, things like that, people who are dealing with severe health issues and so on. And before I get started, I'll just say, seek legal advice. So we're just, again, this is like an introduction to this area to some degree. And so it's intended to be the start of a conversation that you should be having with your own attorney and about your own situation. So in getting started with this, just as a sort of frame, the issue that we're talking about is that many of us baby boomers are finding ourselves caring for senior parents and friends. And the great generation of the 40s, our parents, now in its failing years, unfortunately, sadly, and these people need to provide for their long-term care, and so there's a lot of things to think about related to this. You know, how do we go about it? How can we be more effective? What are some things to know about? So Betty, in getting started with this, maybe you can explain to us a little about just what is a durable power of attorney for health care?
A durable power of attorney for health care in California, there's a combined document called Advanced Healthcare Directive and Durable Power of Attorney. And the person who is creating this document for their own care is called the principal. So when I say principal,
you just talk to me, Betty.
I'm sorry.
It's
yeah.
okay.
When I say principal, I'm talking about the person who needs care.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And the person that they appoint to make decisions for them is called the agent.
Mm-hmm.
So the powers of attorney are effective when either immediately you can sign a power of attorney and say, I want that effective right now, or you can have it triggered by an event or circumstance. Let's say, for example, when I become disabled. That's very common. And it's only effective as to the agent when they accept the responsibility. So if you filled out a document appointing me as your agent, I wouldn't have to take that task upon myself, except I could accept it, and then I would be responsible.
Mm-hmm.
The features of a durable power of attorney, which is mostly what we're dealing with for the care of an elder person, are that they're revocable by that person as long as they're legally able to do that. But they must have legal capacity at the time they do it. But later, if they become incapacitated, which means that they don't have the legal ability to contract or to make that decision, then that document still is effective. The issue is that people don't just go one day from having capacity and another day from being incapacitated. There's this in-between time. And so they might think they have capacity, but they don't. They might be angry, so they might say they're going to revoke it, or they don't cooperate with the treatment that the agent is imposing. So if that happens, then the agent really has to go to court and get an order to overcome the objections of the principal. This is a thoroughly voluntary document, so you can't force the person, even though in theory it's still a valid document when they become incapacitated.
Okay. What's an advanced health care directive? So you're saying that these can sort of be combined. But
Yes.
maybe
California has a statutory form that is combined.
Okay.
So the California form appoints an agent, as I just described, and the Advanced Health Care Directive is meant to inform the agent and the medical field and whoever else needs that information about what you want to have happen in your treatment, specifically what end-of-life decision-making you'd like to have. So you can have a full amount of treatment, everything available, and you can put that on your documents, but most people don't do that. Most people's intention in making that document, creating that document, is to avoid the over-treatment of the end of life.
So it's what we call avoid the heroics.
Yes, right.
So, you know, especially if you've got somebody that's 95 years old and they're really in declining health, and so it's like,
they have
what's
a
the
heart
point,
attack,
you know?
or they end up with respiratory distress or get a massive infection, a stroke. Those are common. And they can choose from those things like feeding tubes, respirators they do or don't want, cardiac resuscitation, hydration, even antibiotics or surgery, those kinds of things. One of the two, I think, controversial issues have to do with pain relief, because the doctor might say, well, the pain is so great we want to give them morphine, but if we give them more, then it might hasten their death. So, the person in executing those documents can make a choice about whether they want to have morphine for pain, even if it hastens death. They don't say morphine, they say pain relief. And also artificial nutrition and hydration. Sometimes that's withheld because maybe they're going to live on in a vegetative state. So maybe they want that withdrawn. They don't want to be tube fed and artificially kept alive in a comatose state, for example.
Yeah. So these are obviously really tough. As having these, to make these decisions, and I've been in this position, and I know you've had you had counsel me. But anyway, it's very, very difficult for families to do these. So the Advanced Health Directive helps a lot for that person, so at least you know what that person's wishes would be.
Yeah, you're right. That's, I think, the most important feature, because you can appoint an agent, but you're really asking someone to use their judgment based upon what your wishes have been as you describe them to them. So if you don't have that conversation, they don't have that basis.
Right, and I've had to do that without that conversation. But anyway.
It's hard.
Yeah.
And especially if other family members have different opinions and you have to make a decision.
Yeah. So what other preparation can you make for your care when your health declines? You just talked about these two documents. What are other things to think about?
Well, the other things to think about include what kind of care, where you're going to have your care, let's say it that way. You might want to remain in your home. Most people do. They want to remain in their home no matter what. So if you have enough funds or some resources, maybe you have a lot of family that are willing, if you can be safely and appropriately cared for in your home, then most people prefer that. But if that's not the case, if you cannot be, there are a number of other types of facilities that you can be moved to, or you can move yourself depending on how incapacitated you are. In Santa Clara County and the Bay Area, we're rather fortunate because we have a whole array of choices. There are assisted living facilities. There's senior housing, which is kind of supported independent living. There are board and care homes, which differ. I think they're licensed the same as assisted living, but they differ in that it's more like a little family home, and maybe 4 to 6 people live there with care providers. Of course, there's nursing homes, and there are places that you can buy into and have ownership of a condominium when you're older but no incapacity, and they have different levels of care on the same grounds. So that lends some stability and comfort so that you know that you're going to be there at that site, if not in that unit.
Okay. So, let's see here. Can you explain some advantages and disadvantages related to health care for a durable power of attorney, a conservatorship, and a living trust? So sort of, how do these contrast a little bit? People may have heard of some of these things. Most people don't really understand them, so maybe you can explain it a little bit.
Well, I think I talked about the voluntariness of the power of attorney.
Right.
And then you have maybe the principal has been gotten to the point where they're mentally incapacitated, or they're so angry over their incapacity that they become uncooperative even though they originally appointed this person. Or maybe there is no power of attorney. So in order to properly take care of someone who's not cooperative, you may need to go to court. Now, you could go to court if you had a power of attorney to overcome an objection in kind of a singular situation. But if this is an ongoing problem, you might want to petition the court to get let's call the agent person at this point to become a conservator, which is the person who performs those same functions. But this time you have court authority. It helps with the healthcare providers because they recognize the conservator has these rights. And as long as, again, if the conservatee is cooperative during a conservatorship, then you don't need any more powers than the conservatorship. But if they're not cooperative, the court can layer over the medical powers, what we call exclusive powers, which means that you can make decisions even over the objections of the conservatee. For example, we've had people who don't want an abscess tooth pulled, or they don't want surgery for a breast cancer. You know, those are real things that I've experienced with my clients in my practice. And it's not that the person is going to die from them. They could be successfully returned to a high quality of life. Their refusal to have that treatment is not reasonable. So you need that authority from the court to overcome their objections to that treatment. In a living trust, the trust is primarily for financial management of your, all of your assets, or however many assets that you actually place in the trust, and has nothing to do with making healthcare decisions for you. Although on occasion I've seen someone put a healthcare type of authority for the trustee in those documents, but it's kind of not appropriate to put them in a financial document.
So it'd be sort of you'd be probably putting together a package. Okay, it would include probably a living trust as part of your elder care and estate planning, sort of combined.
Well, true. A healthcare, an estate planning package typically, I know that I do it, and I know most other attorneys I know do it. They do a living trust if that's appropriate for the client, wills for the client, maybe a husband and wife, there are 2 wills for them, which maybe pour over into that trust, a durable power of attorney for healthcare, healthcare directive, a durable power of attorney for financial management, maybe some deeds, maybe even a living will, in which that document, not so common in California, but that document is meant to fully and more detail describe those things that you want to have happen before you die. That's why it's called a living will. And the will without the living in front of it is after you die.
Okay. When do you favor in-home care, and what are other alternatives when your health is declining?
I favor in-home care when as I said before, that when the person has a financial ability to do so and they want to stay in their home, it can be quite expensive to do that. I have had cases where the conservatee or the person without a conservatorship has a large family, maybe a lot of children or other family members who are willing to live in the home with them or rotate in. So people without a lot of assets can sometimes make that happen. I also think it's very important to be aware, I call it cognitive ability, to understand where they are and enjoy that. And it doesn't have to be a high level. They just feel comfortable where they are and they know that they're at home. And so usually, as long as possible, living in their home is very comforting to them. On the other hand, a lot of people are very lonely when they stay in their own home. It depends on the person and a lot of other factors. They could go to day care services, but some people are very happy once they move to a senior environment. We have a lot of very good kind of socially active facilities where they have group eating, they have a restaurant environment, they have trips in the van, they have other people that are there, they have ping pong and bingo and music and intellectual pursuits. They even go to the opera, that kind of thing. So if someone's isolated and lonely in their own home, maybe a widow who is, maybe not as lively as they used to be, but not really incapacitated, they might not want to stay in their home alone. So I think what really matters is the desire of the person that we're talking about. But most people say, at least, that they want to stay in their own home.
Yeah. We had a situation that I'll share a little bit related to this with my father-in-law. And so as he was getting along in years, at first he was saying, if I decline, get Alzheimer's, whatever, just take me to Oregon. Take me to Oregon. Let them euthanize me.
Oh, I see. Because
and we're all saying, oh my gosh, Well, anyway, so his wife passed away, my mother-in-law, and my daughter was able to stay with him for a while. And he did pretty well while she was with him for a few years. And we would have him over for dinner and things. My wife would take him on outings and so on. But his condition continued to decline. And my daughter got married and so moved out. And so he was by himself. And anyway, and I would go and see him regularly, help him to keep up with his finances and so forth. Well, anyway, then my wife and I were on a trip overseas, and he walked to the store and he had a spill on the way home. He fell down. And he got himself back up again, and he got back okay, got back home, and he's sitting there thinking to himself, well, what am I going to do if something happens to me?
He didn't break a bone or anything?
No, he was okay, but it was a scare for him. It made him think. And so when we got back, he said to my wife, I think I need to go and maybe just look at some places. And he was getting some care, seeing a doctor. Basically, he was developing Alzheimer's.
I see.
And so we're saying, because the care gets pretty heavy, it's not for everybody. Not every family member can care for people that are in that condition. But Janet was thinking, well, maybe I'm going to have to take Dad home. And anyway, but he says, well, let's go and look at some places. And so I'm trying to remember when this was. I think it was probably in November, okay? Because that's when I tend to take my vacations after October 15th.
Yes, after taxes, right?
Anyway, so he went with her to some places, but there was one particular place that he kind of liked, and they really liked him. They were just really nice people. And actually, it was a pretty large center. But he said, well, I just don't think I'm ready for this yet. And so my brother-in-law and sister-in-law came down for the holidays, Christmas time, and they're staying with him. And they said, he's got the heater on at full blast in the middle of the night.
Right.
He doesn't know how to make coffee anymore. It's just obvious he just really can't care for himself. I'm trying to remember. It was either Christmas, I think it was maybe the day after Christmas. The telephone rings and this care center calls. And they said, we have Wally on our list. We put him on the list. And we want him to come and stay with us.
How nice.
And so Janet's sicker than a dog. She had a cold. So my brother-in-law and sister-in-law and Janet stays in the car and takes Wally and he says, okay, I'm ready. I want to move in right now.
Now you better seize the moment.
So we couldn't do it like right now, but we did get him in shortly after. But it was such a relief, and he was very happy there, and he stayed there the rest of his days. And they did have a very active social life there,
Yeah.
which was really nice. The dancing and so forth, and the caregivers would, rub him and things to sort of, let him know he was cared for. And anyway, so that ended up working out very well, and my wife was the trustee and took care of this stuff. So anyway, that's just sort of a story that sometimes people tell you one thing,
Right.
and yet their minds can open up. And
Well, notwithstanding that people say that they want to stay in their home, I have seldom had a client, or even when I was in the public guardian's office, a conservatee, who didn't feel much happier when they went to a facility like you're describing, because they had human contact, they could make friends, they could get involved in things. They have Valentine's dances the other day over at one of the facilities. We were there. They have a barbecue on Labor Day. They have, some big party for every event. And if you're isolated and widowed and lonely, it's really something to consider.
Well, one thing about this place, and it may be a little cue for people, is I've been to some care centers and I found people sitting in a wheelchair outside of their room, or maybe just sitting in their room watching television. In this place, people were not allowed to have a television in their room, and they were not allowed to sit in a wheelchair. They took them in the community area, so they had to be together, and so there had to be some sort of involvement. And anyway, and it ended up being just great.
The best facilities I've ever been in, and my favorite ones around this community, are ones where the staff, they don't sit behind the desk and let people fend for themselves. They're out there having a good time with the residents. There are activities going on. And you can tell when you go in there, the residents are happy.
Yeah. Okay, well, we've talked a little bit about these centers, and hopefully giving a little comfort to some of our viewers that there are good care centers out there, and particularly here in the Bay Area.
Well, and what I like about your story is that there are techniques for family members to gently lead their parents to that kind of decision. I've had similar experiences with our family members too. So, it can be done. There are people who don't want to go, but even those who don't want to go can sometimes be gently shown the way.
Okay. Got about 3 minutes left. Maybe you could talk a little bit about Medi-Cal benefits and, like, do they have to be repaid? Does this really help people?
Well, presently in California, the only custodial care available is either private, long-term care insurance policies, which don't usually pay all of it, or Medicaid. And some people think Medicare covers that, but it doesn't. That's an acute stay at a skilled nursing facility following the hospitalization. It's short-term. And And there are planning techniques, so you don't have to be totally impoverished. That's what it's sort of designed like that, but Congress has built in so many exemptions that there are plans to protect, for example, the spouse who's remaining at home if someone has to go to a nursing home. The one thing was that in California, unlike some other states, have Medi-Cal cover some of the care in a board and care home. But California presently doesn't, although there are pilot programs in some counties where they do. So if someone needs a board and care, and I think that it's economical for the state because they're not putting out as much money in a skilled nursing facility. Maybe the person isn't that sick, but they go to the skilled nursing because they have no money. So doing Medi-Cal planning is very important. You don't have to spend all your money. You don't have to give your house away. There are many things that you can do. And there's repayment to Medi-Cal for the services that they paid for after you die, if anything is left in your estate. But you don't repay them during life. And there are techniques to move your assets out of your estate before you die to avoid that.
Okay. Just have about a minute left. Maybe you could just throw out a final thought, and so we conclude our little interview here.
Well, my final thought is that if you have these issues looming, or even if, I mean, we're all going to be facing death someday, but prior to that, big percentages of people will be facing disabilities. And a lot of people don't plan for that disability, but they need to think in terms of that there's a large percentage of people as they age who will need help. So they should be doing planning. I'm not trying to make this an advertisement for attorneys, but that's where you should be going to sort out all of these issues and make sure that you've provided for some person and plan.
Okay. Betty, thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much.
Folks, hope we've given you some things to think about. We'll see you next time on Financial Insider Weekly.